Welcome to Nevertheless Podcast with Bidemi Mark-Mordi, a show dedicated to organic leaders and leaderpreneurs. Today, you would learn how to discover your essence and live more powerfully.
Hi, welcome to the Nevertheless Show, a show for organic leaders and leaderpreneurs. My name is Bidemi Mark-Mordi. We've been in a series, Curating a Winning Year, and this is our fourth and final episode of that series. The first episode of the series, I talked to you about the fact that to be able to curate a winning year, you have to be solid as a person. And I said that to become a solid person, you need to make sure that you have 5 buckets that are filled with the right kinds of things to be able to curate that year. I told you about the knowledge bucket, the skill bucket, the network bucket, the resource bucket, and today we want to look at the reputation bucket. The knowledge bucket is about what you know. The skill bucket is about what you can do. The network bucket is about who you know. The resource bucket is about what you have. And the reputation bucket is about what people say about you. Who do people say you are? What do they know? It's interesting that even Jesus had to ask the reputation question. He asked his disciples, he said, "Who do men say that I am?" And then when they responded to him and told him all the things that men said about him, he asked them again, he said, "Who do you say I am?" And it was in that conversation that Peter was able to properly define who Jesus was. And Jesus, in acknowledging that Peter understood who he was, said, "Flesh and blood has not revealed it to you, but my Father which is in heaven." The point is that even as believers in the marketplace and all of that, reputation is critical. It is critical. It is so important that you have the right reputation. Now, what makes us different from everyone else who is trying to curate or fill their reputation bucket is that we have boundaries as to how we curate the reputation that we want to leave. So where people manufacture backstories and just build things out of thin air, and then leave the trace in the footprints on the internet so that when you Google them, you only find out certain kinds of things. The best way that I know is to live an authentic life. If you want the right reputation to curate a winning year, you want to make sure that what I call your self-story is important. Your self-story would have to do with the stories you tell yourself about yourself. Many years ago, God told me, "Bidemi, if you lie to yourself," he said, "self-deceit is deadly." What that means is that if I lie to everybody, it will not be as bad as when I begin to lie to myself and believe the lies that I tell myself. So the stories you tell yourself about yourself, they play a crucial role in forging the kind of reputation that endures for all time and for several seasons. Again, everybody knows that self-story is important. So you find people manufacturing stories that do not exist. A few days ago, I was talking to a group of people and I said to them, "Is it not interesting that almost every president in Africa didn't own shoes when they were young? They never wore shoes when they were young." It's become the story that people share every time because they are trying to curry or they're trying to touch an emotional spot in their listeners. But that doesn't have to be our case. As believers, authenticity is the first way to curate the right self-story. Are you authentic with yourself? If you're authentic with yourself, then you would recognize something quickly, that a story does not need to be sensational to be a winning story. So it doesn't have to be how someone beat you, or you've suffered abuse, you've suffered lack, you've suffered poverty. If you were not born into a poor family, don't make up a story that suggests poverty. And if you were not born into an abusive family, don't make up stories that suggest abuse. Just be real. It is okay to be born to an financially empowered family. It doesn't negate your self-story. Just the same way it's okay to be born to a loving family. It's okay. As a matter of fact, you have a story that most of us may not have. So own that story and tell it properly. Your self-story is important, is powerful, and it is real. The reason why for me, my self-story needs to be what it is that it is because otherwise I would find myself having to try to remember the self-story. You'll find that, I don't know whether you've experienced it, but I have experienced situations where someone's self-story in one setup or in one network is conflicting with their self-story in another network. But of course, masters of the game know how to make sure that it is the one story. It's just that it is a lie. It is the one story, but nobody can corroborate that story. That's not how reputation is critical, but we're not supposed to manufacture stories just so that we can build the kind of reputation that we have to build. In these days where the world is worse than a global, the entire world looks like it's contained in a teapot. If somebody sneezes in America today, I will find out in the second that they sneeze in Lagos. We need to be very careful what we put out there. So number one, authenticity. Number two, differentiation is something else. That is, to be different is not a curse. There was a time that everybody wanted to be the same kind of person. We wore the same kind of things. We dressed the same kind of way. All the banks, had the same dress code. All the universities had the same dress code. But we got to a point where we realized that difference is powerful. And so my story doesn't need to sound like any other person's story for it to be real and for it to be powerful. Differentiation is good. Self-compelling stories that set you apart from others. Remember, not manufactured, but put you as, identify you as the unique, distinct individual that you are. Your self-story must be able to influence. Please, let's listen to this. You must be able to influence people's perceptions of you. If it's authentic, I find out that it influences properly. You don't need to. Recently I saw all these video clips and all these challenges that we do online. And I saw people coming online to share things that, in my opinion, are sacred and should never be shared. The things that happen between a man and his wife should never be shared for the world to see. But people, in trying to garner clicks and likes, would say anything about themselves online. So I find that increasingly we've thrown caution to the wind. We're saying all kinds of things just because sensationalism will make it go viral. Do you want to be viral or you want to build a solid reputation? You need to determine what it is that works for you. Because here's the point that I am trying to make. When your self-story is powerful and it is the right self-story, you build credibility and trust. People only do business and do life with those that they know, they like, and they trust. But if all your self-stories cannot be affirmed and validated, you become like someone who is bipolar. Nobody knows what face you would show in the moment. You have so many masks. And because of that, people find it difficult to do life with you. When you have the right, authentic story, it will build trust and credibility. Now, talking about trust and credibility, I know without a shadow of doubt that when we build trust and we build credibility, not everyone will follow us. And that's okay, because not everyone is supposed to follow you and not everyone is supposed to like you. But make sure that those to whom your story resonates are able to trust you enough and find you credible enough to show up again and again and again and again. You see, when it comes to business especially, one-off buyers are great. But if you really want to know that your business is a great business, repeat buyers. Because these people will buy from you in sun and in the rain. Why? Because for them, buying from you is not only about the service, It's about who you are, because people buy into you before they buy anything that you're selling. This is the reason why reputation is so critical. I know that we have reputation management people who go online and they plant stories here and there and there. So I know about search engines and SEOs and stuff like that. But really, as great as all those things are, and as far as they will push you, do you honestly think that if you enter a room with an individual, that they can't tell who you are? They do. They can. And that's why for me, this is something that we need to pay attention to. Your reputation bucket, in my opinion, is the most important bucket of all of these buckets. You want to make sure that who you say you are is who you are. So we're looking at self-stories. Self-stories must validate your character. When I give you a self-story and then you come and you, in proximity with me, everything that I am is not what my self-story says, there is a problem. You don't want people to be disappointed when they come close enough to you. That's why your self-story must be the right self-story. And then when people come to you, you see this thing about building stories and reputations where we are not accessible. It hurts us ultimately. In my opinion, I'm sorry, but this is my opinion. It hurts you rather than enhance you. So if you're building your story, make sure you build and tell your story well. One of the things that I learned early is that whether we build and we curate our own story and tell our own stories or not, stories will be told about us. And what I have learned is that unless you're in charge of that story, people will tell all kinds of stories about you. I can't tell you how many things I have read online about people that are not true. But in fact, the less true it is, the more people who read it. But there is always the test of reputation. The test of reputation is adversity. The test of reputation is when people come close to you. When they come to you, will you be who you are? Because reputation really, when we define the reputation, is who people say you are. But I'm of the opinion that who I say I am would determine to a large extent who people say I am ultimately. Especially if over the years I'm consistently the same person that I am. And the only way you can consistently be the same person that you are is that you are living from your authentic self. If you are living from your authentic self, it's who you are, is who you are. So you need to sit down and say, what do I want people to see? Who do I want them to know me to be? Not by, again, forging things, but deciding that, look, I am growing, and in this season, I want them to see the empathy of Jesus through me. And then you begin to work on yourself to be able to show empathy in the places where empathy is required. Does this make sense? So, for me, these are some of the ways where you ensure that your backstory is the right one. Remember, you have to be authentic. Remember to embrace your difference. That difference is not necessarily a bad thing. Remember that I told you that whatever you're doing must be strong enough, or whatever you're crafting must be strong enough to influence others, because they will deal with you how they perceive you by your influence. Remember that whatever story you are telling about yourself will either build or destroy trust and credibility in your person. And remember that the best way, really, to get people to know you is to show up and be you. So this thing about, I want to feel important, and because I want to feel important, I am not going to be accessible, is hurting your brand. And you can't build a winning year with that kind of attitude. Yes? So, what do you want out of your 2025? Does your self-story portray you as someone who is mentally tough? Does it tell the stories of adversity that you have surmounted, especially with believers. We want people to think that we've had a perfect life. But have you had a perfect life? I don't think so. And again, like I said, if you have not struggled in a certain thing, even if it sells, don't say have struggled in it. Just be yourself. And from that point on, your reputation will speak for itself. And people will not be confused about who you are when they come close to you enough. All of this is because we want to win with our year in 2025. I know this episode is a really short one, but I mean, how many things can we talk about when it comes to reputation? Before I go, I want to comment to you this account in Acts chapter 6, I believe, of Ananias and Sapphira. In Acts chapter 6, either 5 or 6, I think it's 6, you find that Ananias and Sapphira belonged in a community, a network of disciples at that time who had agreed to own a common purse and run their businesses and run their lives out of that common purse. Ananias and Sapphira decided to sell a plot of land and to donate part of the proceeds from that plot of land into this common purse. They sold the land and then they came to bring money to put in the purse. Then the fox of reputation kicked in. They showed up, and after they had donated what they wanted to donate. Ananias says to Peter and says, "Oh, that this is all we sold the land for." And his wife corroborated that story, and that was what led to the demise of their lives. I don't think that this is about death as it is about the destruction of a reputation because we have refused or we have chosen to not interact or transact with truth. They wanted, for all we know, they gave more than anybody else. But the problem was that even if they didn't give more than everyone else, they had made a sacrifice by selling their land and bringing part of the proceeds. They didn't even need to say whether it was a portion of the proceeds or it was all of the proceeds. So why did they say this is all we sold the land for? I'm talking to you about reputation. The reason why they did that was because they wanted people to see them as better than they are. They were already good people. They were contributing to a pot to take a purse that would take care of the poor in their community. So they didn't need to apple polish or Photoshop who they are or launder their own image just so that it would seem that they are really great people. But they did that, and that did not end well. When we Photoshop, when we launder the image, because everybody will tell you their brand strategies, and that's the way to go. As long as you show up and whatever it is that you allow people to put out there concerning you are putting out is doctored. Imagine that you had temporary amnesia and your mind, your brain or your memories was reset to only the things that are true. Who would you be in that moment? The reputation bucket, again, in my opinion, is the foundation that carries the network, that carries the resource, that carries the skill, and carries the knowledge. So whatever you do, when you show up, remember that you did not show up in 2025 by yourself. God released you here, and He released you for a purpose. Please do not mess it up. You want to have a winning year? Make sure that you are who you say you are, even before people begin to repeat and tell others who they think that you are. I've come to the end of this series, and we have looked at how to curate a winning year. And I have said that you should start with you. Start with you. Sit down, put pen to paper. Make sure that you know what it is that you want to see your year to look like. And make sure that whatever you are curating aligns with what God has spoken over you. I promise you at the end of this year, if you will just pay heed to these things and the many other things that the Lord will enable me to share in the course of this year, you will get where you need to go. You can have a powerfully limitless life or year ahead of you. But will you do the work? And the work begins with you. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me. And please don't forget to share and forget to like and follow me on social media. Who knows where else I'll be teaching or talking and what I'll be talking about. You are loved and you are appreciated. It's been the Nevertheless Show, a show for organic leaders and leaderpreneurs. God bless you and thank you.
Thank you for listening to Nevertheless. For more information and resources, call 080-90563-555 or send an email to bidemi@bidemimark.com. Don't forget, discovering your purpose helps you live more powerfully.